Father, thank you for this wonderful day and for having our pastor back with us. I pray minister with us this morning and to us. Help us to be led by you in Jesus' name.
Amen. Praise God. Well, it's good to be here this morning. Good to be in the house of God and to be speaking without an interpreter is also always a nice upgrade. And so great to be here. And we're finishing off in the next couple of weeks the Memorial Stones series. So if you have a Bible, the book of Joshua chapter 4. The book of Joshua chapter 4. We're going there in the Word of God. And verses 4 to 7, it would do us well to reread that and just keep ourselves up to speed with where we're coming from. Who'd like to read that in a good, clear, loud, New King James voice? Joshua chapter 4, verses 4 through 7. Shane, where you go?
Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he had appointed from the children of Israel, and one man from every tribe. And Joshua said to them, "Cross over to before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and each one of you take up a stone on his shoulder, and according to the number of the tribes of Israel, the children of Israel, that they may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, asking, what are these stones? What do these stones mean to you? Then you shall answer them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord when it crossed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan. The water of the Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be for a memorial to the children of Israel forever."
All right, very simple. Crossing the Jordan, 12 stones, 12 to place as a memorial in the river, covered by the water. These speak about our deep convictions that we will reproduce. It will be more like church culture or fellowship culture. Those things are deep within the heart of a man, and then the superficial one on the outside for those who ask about why you do what you do. Then you're able to explain to them what God had done and where you've come from. So that's the principle of the Memorial Stones. Pastor Greg Mitchell did this series in Prescott for the whole fellowship in 40 weeks, just a couple of years ago. Well worth your while looking that up on the Potter's House Prescott website. And we showed them here over quite some time, and now we're doing a brief Sydney one or a Parramatta one, and we're up to the final stages. And for the concluding 2 and perhaps 3 weeks, we're going to look at some of the people of Memorial Stones, and we're going to look at some this week church planting and some of the pastors that we have planted out, and a little bit about their testimonies. Some people who have joined the church or got saved in the last, could even be 5, 10, 15, 20 years, would not know these people. And where they come from, they're just names on a board, but at some point they sat here and got saved, had testimonies, have testimonies, were disciples, became leaders, and then at a conference, just like we're having in a couple of weeks, were planted out and started ministries on their own. So we're going to be doing that over the next couple of weeks. We're going to do just the specific ones that would be of relevance to us here in Parramatta, not the whole state, not the whole universe, but just some ones that are relevant to us. And so quickly put up the church planting tree for us, please, Wes. All right, we looked at that and we went back to 1989 and then all the way through to the present, and some churches that have been planted out of Parramatta. I think from memory there are 21. In fact, it's in my notes here, 21. And then the left-hand side. All right, a little bit of an up close. You can see some of those names and dates, some of those people, and then the right-hand side. And so we're looking at numbers of these and their testimonies and where they come from. And so because they're the oldest and the furthest back, we're starting with Pat and Kathy Edwards. And so a little bit of a background. I sent an email out, as a matter of fact, in April, 4 months ago, and to these people that were involved, and said, I want you to send me some photos, a little bit of a background of where you've come from, so that the people in the Parramatta Church who don't know you would know who you are, how you got saved, where you came from, and some of your ministry steps, as well as perhaps some things you've done ministry-wise. And so we did that, and we had almost a complete number of people responded. Some haven't responded. I'm reminding them we may get those before next week. But Pat and Kathy Edwards, and I'm going to breeze through these because there's quite a few of them, quite some detail. And if you want to ask some questions, I'll take some questions from time to time. We're going to breeze through this. So first of all, it's Pat and Kathy Edwards, and Kathy said these words as a part of her biography or her bio. I'd been reading the Bible for 6 months after a year of difficulties in my relationship with Pat, a boy I'd been dating since 1982. I guess they started dating in primary school. I went to the Potter's house when a school friend named Elizabeth was married in February 1987. The pastor did not have a collar around his neck, spoke and read from the Bible, and I knew everything he said was true, but couldn't respond with school friends by my side. The very next week, we went on a holiday to the Gold Coast, and we bumped into Elizabeth and her new husband, Greg, on their honeymoon. We were sinners living together while they were saved, married, and Elizabeth said she'd invite me to church when they returned. The following month, the church moved into the Billabong, above the Billabong Hotel, and Elizabeth invited me to an End Times movie, and I was saved that night, as was Anna Zabura, who is now Anna McLean. Here's a couple of photos from way back when. And that's Anna Zabura in the middle. That's Renata, as you can see there on the left. The next one. And that again is Kathy and Anna that are right there. And so that's them. Though Pat responded to wanting to go to heaven, it was a month later that he received Christ. We were baptized in May, engaged the weekend. Vanessa Hopkins' leg grew out during a revival in June, the first miracle I'd seen of its kind, and were married in October. Here's a couple of more pictures. Kids. And then there's one more. That's them, some wedding photos. I walked down the aisle in white, and when Pat and I looked at each other, we both cried. We'd found the author of true love in Jesus Christ and could once again love each other. Thankfully, we had photos beforehand because crying ruined my makeup. The church grew rapidly that year as party people. We loved being busy serving God with outreaches and concert scenes every week. And here's a picture of Pat and Kathy being launched into Blacktown, 1985. That's my younger brother there on the right. And here's a picture of the Blacktown Hall where they began. A lot of good times there. How many ever went to a church service in the hall? Josh went, I think. All right, that was where they began the church there in that hall. And here's a picture of the Eternity building that they moved into. And then another one. Then another one. Didn't I send you two of those? Oh, that is two. All right. And then one more when they were announced into Hangzhou, China. This is their launching ceremony. Okay, here's Pat. My motive for attending the church in 1987 was to see if my girlfriend Kathy had found another man. I was intensely jealous as a result of our less than ideal relationship setup. My first impressions were it's above the Billabong Hotel. This is not a church building. And one of those American preachers. There was a group of 25 or so enthusiastic and friendly people and a mysterious dynamic that I could not identify. Something intangible was definitely going on here. Kathy was saved at an End Times movie and experienced a radical life change. I was self-righteous and religious and held out for another month before being saved at a week-long Larry Huck revival. We were keen to do whatever Christians do, so we plunged into 3 services per week, each preceded by an hour's prayer meeting, outreach every Thursday night, also preceded by an hour of prayer, weekly concert scenes and practice sessions for band and drummer ministries. Revival ensued, and the church grew rapidly. A devastating church split, disintegrated relationships, destroyed destinies, and decimated church attendance. Pat highlighting the 3 Ds there. It took us at least a decade, as a 4th one, to recover the numbers, and 5 years before we discovered, that's a 5, our vision and planted our first pioneer work. We were announced to pioneer in Blacktown in 1995 and were there for nearly 20 years until the vision of the Parramatta Fellowship extended to international church planting. We were announced into Hangzhou, China in 2014. It has been our utmost privilege to be the vanguard in these important steps in the development of the Sydney Fellowship and the Parramatta congregation. Here's a picture of from China. That's a wedding of Elam and Usagi Tangan, and there's another picture there in their church building there in Hangzhou. Okay, any quick questions? How, why, when, where? Okay, the next one, these aren't in any particular order, but Malcolm and Fiona Anderson. So Malcolm was saved in 1990 and he joined the Potter's House, Penrith. Here's a picture of Malcolm and Fiona. Some things never change. And Fiona, as a matter of fact, she got saved in a Potter's House church in Toowoomba. And there are a number of girls saved up in that church up there in Toowoomba. And Malcolm married one of them, and a couple of others got married. It was into Lismore, maybe. Was at least one or two of them into Lismore. But saved in 1990, joined the Potter's House in Penrith. Here's the young couple. Fiona and I were planted out for the first time in 1996 into the city of Chatswood. And so here's a picture of them being launched out at the Roads and Rivers Conference in 1996. That was the Blacktown, the Penrith pastors, Mick and Margaret Vrotniak, that were planted out in 1989. So they planted out Malcolm and Fiona into Chatswood. Here's a picture in Chatswood of a revival with Howard Avistame, who at that point was evangelizing out of our congregation here. Howard pioneered in Liverpool and then came into Parramatta as an evangelist, was here for a couple of years before returning to Perth for a season of redirection. And here's a picture of Malcolm and Fiona with some converts from Chatswood in their congregation there. We pioneered for 2.5 years and came back for redirection in May 1999. And eventually joined the Parramatta Church. In 2001, we ran the first men's camp at Weenie Creek in Currajong. Fiona and I took over the Windsor Church in 2009. Here's a picture of the Windsor Saints. And some young Anderson kids. We returned in 2012 and were announced into Auburn in 2016. Here's a picture of the Auburn church with an outreach from Parramatta. And you may pick up a few of the Auburn Saints and a few of the Parramatta Impact team there on the picture. We handed the church over to David and Doreen in August 22 and took over the Eastwood Church, which was originally pioneered by Corey and Sharon Bourne in 2007. Our regular attendance has increased by 50%. And God is blessing the church with new converts and financial stability. Numbers of our recent new converts are teenagers between 15 and 18 years of age. In addition to that, the church has invested in an impact team to Vanuatu, where we saw 250 plus decisions and several demonstrable miracles. Blind eyes open, the deaf hear, and the mute speak. Any questions on Malcolm and Fiona, where they've come from? Chatswood, Windsor, Auburn, Eastwood, or Melrose Park. Any questions? Okay, next couple, Darren and Joanne Manzone. Darren's speaking in the first person. My wife got saved first on the 9th of July, 1996, but took 6 months to get into church. She locked into the Parramatta Church on the 7th of January, 1997, and I got saved on the 17th of December, 2000, 4.5 years after Joanne. Here's a picture of their wedding. It looks like Luke Manzon. When we first came to the Parramatta Church together in the year 2000, the church was about 40 people at the small Burnside Public School Hall. At the time, we lived in Maroubra and knew we needed to be closer to church. I had said I would never live further west than Anzac Parade. But we moved to Brighton Les Sands, then finally Toongabbie, where we were finally close enough to be part of the church and be a disciple. The church then moved to Bryan's Road, where I was able to help renovate the building and really be a part of what God was doing. It was around this time I felt called to preach. And in 2006, I was sent out of the Parramatta church into Windsor, 40 kilometres from Maroubra, to pioneer, I should say 40 kilometres west from Maroubra to pioneer a new church. Here's a picture of him being launched. All right, there's a picture of them being launched into Windsor. Here's a picture of the young pioneering couple outside their hall with this banner. They're in Windsor. That's where it all begins, with their little kids there. We were in Windsor for 3 years before we were invited to come back and be the first assistant pastors of the Parramatta church. We then moved to North Parramatta into the current building, and again, I had the opportunity to assist in the renovations of the new building, which would facilitate what God was doing until now. Then in 2013, we were given the opportunity to take over the Hurstville Church. The Hurstville Church began, here's the first picture of the opening of the Hurstville Church. That's the Bexley School of Arts. And anybody who knows from back in then, that's Freddie Nassif there on the left-hand side, saved as a teenager and was in the Hurstville Church for a couple of years at that particular time. So the church began in the Bexley School of Arts. Here's a picture of the changeover when Pastor Plummer left and Pastor Darren took over. That was the hall in Ramsgate, which was called, was it a scout hall in Ramsgate? Scout hall in Ramsgate, yes, all right, thank you. And then here's a couple of pictures from Hurstville. And gone from the Bexley School of Arts all the way through to now Hurstville. And another picture from Hurstville, you can hold it on that one there. To date, we have 9 churches out with 2 missionaries in New Zealand. And Darren insisted on sending a picture with his favourite pastor. All right. Any questions? Okay, they're in Hurstville as we speak. As a matter of fact, this afternoon he's flying into Perth. And I mentioned him this morning. He's flying into Perth to do a Sunday night in Perth and then an area-wide men's D. And I said, you will be the first non-Beachborough pastor to preach in the brand new renovated building. And so whether he was aware of that or not, I'm not sure. Okay, next is Ernest and Tay Bourne. That's not them? All right, so Tay, speaking in the first person, my parents got saved in the Wollongong church in the late 80s. When the church was first planted, I grew up in church and first felt the need to be right with God at 4 years of age. Let there be more of it. First felt the call to be saved at 4 years of age. Here's a picture of her. Can you see which one she is? That's the little 4-year-old there. That's about when she got saved. She's John Perry's age, hasn't he? Dear God, help us. Help us all. You won't be watching. That's a good sign. I answered the altar call soon after and prayed the sinner's prayer with my grandmother. As a teenager, I have many good memories of attending Sydney Conference in Rooty Hill and Liverpool with my friends. In 2008, at 18, I was diagnosed with stage 2 cancer, and after 6 months of chemotherapy, I was declared in remission and told to resume life as normal. But after going through such a tough season of life, I became very angry at God and questioned everything about Him and His plan for my life. I was encouraged to start attending morning prayer. And through praying and building a relationship with God, I recommitted my life to Him and surrendered to His plan for my life. Here's Ernest. I got saved in 2006 in the Bryan's Road building. Just wait. I'll call for the photos. I got saved in 2006 in the Bryan's Road building, and the very next day, God did a miracle and rescued me from my abusive family. You ought to ask somebody who was around at that time how that went down. But he got saved and rescued, literally a police rescue. from his abusive family before he locked in to the church here. This is a picture of him being baptized at the Parramatta Lakes. And we had to scrape the duck poo off the pond to start with, and had to give the girls shoes to wear as they had to walk in through the thing out there to get baptized. Anybody get baptized in Parramatta Lakes? Oh, come on, somebody. Come on, somebody. Truly, truly, truly saved. This is Ernie getting baptized there at Parramatta Lakes. Here is Ernie in his favourite going out wear. Next photo. He loved to rock a singlet. And then here is he working at the back desk in the church. Again, rocking another singlet. I moved in with Pastor Corey and Sharon Bourne that week and was immediately surrounded by families like the Bournes, Edwards, Simacs, and Walshes, who welcomed me into their lives and developed and helped guide me as a new Christian. A significant moment in my early salvation was rolling Trent's car with Josh Edwards inside. I'm not sure if the parents are aware of that, but that may be news to somebody. Okay. I thought about running away and leaving everything behind, but went back and faced the consequences, and I was shown so much forgiveness by the Bournes and the Edwards, it really made an impression on me. Every time I stuffed up as a new Christian, and there were many, I was always shown so much grace from Pastor Walsh and Pastor Corey. I went on many overseas impact teams with Pastor Walsh, and these are some of the best memories from my time in Parramatta. The trip to India in 2009 was when I decided to become a disciple and build a relationship with my pastor. That was also the first time, by the way, I saw Ernest in a dress. We were in a place on the impact team, and we went to morning prayer, and Ernest was bragging about the fact that he's bought these cargo pants for $10 Australian, and they were kind of good, thick stuff and pockets everywhere, and he was really excited about that. And he sat down at morning prayer on a chair, and they split right through the center seam. I mean, bang, just like that. And then he's all embarrassed, and so all he could do was go next door and buy a sari. And so he was on the streets that day with the sari, and I'm not sure if the other pairs of pants he bought survived the trip. But that was him. Okay. In 2010, Matt Maddox and I formed a hip-hop band, which ended up being the longest-serving band in Parramatta. I officially met Tay at Perth Conference, where she found me really annoying and loud. But after hanging out at many fellowships and church events, we eventually became great friends, and in August 2012, we got married. Here's a wedding photo. And thankfully, I think he got a singlet under the shirt. But in 2014, leave that one up there. In 2014, we had the privilege of becoming Bible study leaders. And in 2016, I became the outreach director. And in 2017, I was asked to run the song service team, which taught me a lot about working with people and leadership. In 2022, we and our 4 children were launched out to start a new church in St. Clair. And so here's a picture of them with the church banner. And how many have been to St. Clair for any event in recent times? Here's their opening. Just wait. I'll tell you when to put the photos up. Trent, okay, Wes, back to the banner. There we go. All right, so here's the opening. Banner, first services opening there with the kids there. And then here's the opening church services. And just a handful of people. The guy in the back second seat from the aisle there, he was one of the original ushers. And everybody tithed. Everybody gave pledges. Everybody gave toward evangelism. Took off jewelry, put it in the bucket, whatever they needed to do was that. The St. Clair Church has now been open 3 years. And in that time, God has built a fantastic congregation with many key people getting radically saved. The church now has people in ministry, serving in the song service team, concert band, and Sunday school. The church is filled with many young people who want to become disciples and be used by God. Here's some recent photos of the church. And there's one more with Pastor Corey preaching revival when he was evangelizing. And I was there in May for their 3-year anniversary, and there was 99 people in the building. And so I said to the ushers, come on. Come on. There's got to be somebody you haven't counted, somebody you need to count twice. Large people, you can count them for 2. Somebody pregnant, something's going. But 99 is the number, and I've been doing their anniversary for 3 years. I think the first year was around 60, then it was 80, and then 99, the last one. And so they're excited about that. Any quick questions there? And the reason we're telling these stories is, number one, is that if you've been saved in the last 3 years, you wouldn't know them other than them being announced. But at some point, they got saved, had some early struggles, became disciples, got married, and progressed on and out into ministry. And obviously, that's something that can happen for you as well. And that anybody who gets saved can be called into the ministry, raised up, be a disciple, have impact, and then pioneer a church. Okay, the next one is Rod and T.N. Gibson. Happen to be here this morning, along with the Edwardses. And so here's Rod and T.N. Gibson. You can put their picture up. Are you sure that's Rod and T.N. Gibson? There's Rod and T.N., and you can leave that up there. They were both born and raised strict Catholics. T.N.'s teenage years were marked by rejection, immorality, abortion, attempted suicides, and addictions. Rod's early years were a cultural mix of island life, surfing, martial arts, spiritualism, and live music performance. By the time we met in Newcastle in 1990, T.N. was a single mother with sons aged 4 and 2. Having just fled a failed marriage through infidelity, substance abuse, domestic violence, and organized crime. You can hardly believe that. Can you say amen? The miracle of the gospel of Jesus Christ. T.N. was a single mother. We did that. A close friend was converted and invited us to several church events during a simple conversation at home about God and church. We had a supernatural encounter with Jesus. We were dramatically born again. Within a few months of joining the Newcastle church, a pastor visited from Sydney. He introduced himself as Rob and proceeded to identify the gathered new converts by their old nicknames. We returned the favor by calling him Walshy for the next 10 years. From that time on, 91, we visited the Burnside venue for revivals, rallies, outreaches, and impact teams. The Walsh and Edwards kids were the age of our grandkids are now. We began to build close ties with those foundational Parramatta members. In 2001 to 2008, we pioneered in New Zealand. We were blessed by visits, ministry, and investment from the Walsh family and the Parramatta Saints. In 2008, we had the option to go into any leadership church as an evangelist family, and Pastor and Parramatta welcomed and supported us for the next 3 years during the Bryans Road era. We returned from a Fiji missionary stint in 2013 where a Parramatta raiding party had taken one of our daughters for the pastor's youngest son, and have been served and supported here ever since. One of the highlights since our return is seeing what God is doing in Liverpool through the Allens. Adela is our daughter. Our bonds have deepened with those early church members and have spread to their children and grandchildren. As we approach the 40-year milestone, we thank God, the Walshes, and the Parramatta Saints for all that they've done for our entire family. And so that's the Gibsons. Any questions there? Comments, additions, extra statements, contradictions? All right, next one is Ben and Adela Allen. You can put the first picture of them up, please, Wes. He didn't label this and tell me when this was, and so I don't know when it was, but that's them. My wife Adela came to Parramatta in April 2008 as the daughter of a missionary to New Zealand at the age of 15. She was an unsaved church kid when she arrived, not at all that excited about leaving New Zealand and being in Parramatta. She was battling with sin and depression, but the Parramatta church warmly embraced her and her family, and a week after her 16th birthday in October 2008, she gave her life to Jesus. I arrived in Parramatta in January of 2009 as a 20-year-old carnal church kid from Perth, not saved. Here's a picture of Ben. Again, I guess that's just the unsaved carnal church kid picture. That could easily be the unsaved carnal church kid picture there that Ben sent me. I'd been drinking and fooling around, living a double life. I was warmly received by the Parramatta church and remember being a tag-along to the Walsh Monday night dinner with Luke. And after a few months of living in a Christian men's house, God dealt with me about getting married. No, God dealt with me about my double life. Here's another picture. There's some of the lads, I guess, from the church, or at least the single boys' home. Is that Jeff Staples at the back there? And Samuel Bourne. All right. That was him in our church back in those days. I remember meeting with Pastor Walsh and laying it all out. He said, "You've been an idiot, but God can help you. Live for Jesus, get serious about being a disciple and let God use your life." I did, and God has blessed us ever since. Adele and I were married in December of 2012. Here's a couple of photos. There's one, and then there's another one. Right here. We immediately became assistant Bible study leaders to a single Alex Simak. After 4 years of being assistant Bible study leaders, we received our own Bible study in 2017. It was the same year that we were asked to take over the Potter's House Liverpool on a balmy Wednesday night of revival with Ernie Toppin. November 1st, 2017. God has richly blessed us in our years there, and we are privileged to have been able to move into a much larger building and plant 2 pioneer churches. And here's a picture of the Liverpool church somewhat recently. Interesting that the way that he went to Liverpool is that there was a quick change out of Fairfield, and I had to ask Pastor Tony to go from Liverpool and take over the Fairfield church, and I needed somebody to go into Liverpool. And so he came to church on the Wednesday night of the Ernie Toppin revival, and I was waiting for him. He was about 15 minutes late for prayer. I was about to change my mind, but he came in, so can I catch it for a couple of minutes? He said, yes. I said, listen, what would you and Adela think about taking over the Liverpool church from Pastor Tony? And he said, well, can I pray about it? And I said, no problems. He said, how long have I got? I said, around about 10 minutes. And so you better grab your wife and have a bit of a chat. You can use my office if you need to. And they came back in, I don't know how long, couple of minutes, and they said, no problems, we'll do that. When will that be announced? I said, tonight after the service. And so he led the songs, and then after the service, I made the announcement. We laid hands on them, and we haven't seen them since. And so, as members of our congregation, and so they were launched out, took over the Liverpool church, which was quite smallish at the time, compared to where it is right now. I guess it was maybe between 25 and 30, 40 people, somewhere in that vicinity, and took over the church there, moved into this facility, doing some renovations, and God has enlarged that, and obviously, as I said, planted 2 pioneer churches. And so with conference coming up, God only knows what we can do out of the congregation now. And that was Ben and Adela Allen. Any quick questions there? Okay, Chris and Esther Simak. Hi, my name is Chris Simak, and I got saved April 12th, 2002 as a 16-year-old. Here's a picture of him with some other teenagers from the church. Anybody recognize who they are? The guy at the back in the blue shirt is David Barr, which is Gerald and Michelle's son and Sarah's brother. And the little baby girl would be Abby Manzone. And there's a couple of other punks there as well. And so that's them there. Here's a picture of Chris as a backup singer. And that was the Brian's Road building rocking the Sydney Swans colours. And then here's a picture of the church. And there are some other names and faces you might recognize there. That's the Bryans Road building. And that's some of the characters there. One of those men there's now a woman, by the way. So that's a problem. You want to watch out with your backslide. You never know what's going to happen. All right, that's a true story, by the way. All right, better take that one down. Go back to the previous one. That'll be a better option. All right, leave it there. Together with my wife Esther and our 5 incredible children. Okay, now they move to the next one. These are some of their kids. Maybe the grandmothers know about when that would be, but I'm suspecting it's somewhere around 2000 and maybe 6 or 8 years ago, 6 or 7, 8 years ago. All right. We are labouring in the city of Panmure, Auckland, New Zealand. Here's a couple of pictures from the early days of them pioneering. The next one. And like most pioneering churches, a lot of pastors and their kids and very few people. How many were on the impact team of that building, by the way, back in the day? Anybody on the impact team? Good-looking girl at the back there. All right, so that's having been here now for 7.5 years. In April 2025, our church is moving into a new milestone, our own building. They've now moved in. We have disciples, we have connect groups, we have sent impact teams locally, nationally, and internationally. And once again, I find myself on the adventure. I'm stepping out from the safety net of full-time employment God miraculously provided for me at Dilworth College and going part-time. What God holds for us now is the next part of the journey. Our eyes are on full-time ministry, church planting, and international impact. This will happen. I've had the privilege of raising a family of 5 young children into young men and women of God. Amidst the chaos of pioneering and discipleship, they've had to share their home, their time, and their parents, but they've also seen firsthand the miracles of ministry. People healed before their eyes, lives transformed, families restored, and I wouldn't have it any other way. On April 5th, 2025, my wife and I celebrated 16 years of marriage. I'm more in love with her now than I've ever been. I'm more in love with my God than I've ever been. Over here, they call me pastor because they think I know what I'm talking about, but I'm just regurgitating what Pastor Walsh has taught me. Thank you, Pastor Nan. Thank you, Parramatta Church. The best is yet to come. And here's a recent picture of their church. They're in Panmure in New Zealand. And tonight, I'm going to give you show you a brief video from their church being an impact team for Pastor Corey in Glenfield. And they were an impact team yesterday to Glenfield and had quite some impact, but you'll have to be out for tonight's service to hear about that or to see the video. Okay, next one, Josh and Maz Walsh. This is Josh. My earliest memories of the Parramatta Church was the Uniting Church Hall in North Parramatta, followed by the Burnside Public School. My church memories start from here. Sunday schools were in the art room, nursery in the main school building, soccer after church on the ovals, thorn bushes and berry hunting down the back near the creek. What a place to grow up and have church. I also remember Corey and Sharon getting saved and Trent being the first Eshe. I had to look that up. The first Eshe ever with his hat backwards looking for treasure. And I did look it up. Eshe is a slang expression associated with Western Sydney urban youth subculture that originated in the late 80s, if you hadn't heard that before. I also remember the morning that Pastor Darren got saved and all the ladies ran to the back and started crying with Joanne. My first band was with Chris and Michael Elliott, and that started off an incredible music career, then eventually getting married to the love of my life, having 3 wonderful kids, getting sent to Maroubra, then Eastwood, then asked to be the assistant pastor at Parramatta. What an incredible journey and a phenomenal church. We are currently involved in our greatest privilege, pioneering a church planting centre in the nation of Mauritius, all thanks to the faithful saints in the Parramatta Church. Maz said, I was in year 10 when my maths teacher, Mr. Munzone, invited me to a Stacey Dillard concert, and I went with my best friend Sam. Here's a picture of them somewhere back then. They got saved when they were 15 or 16. We got saved, and Joe and Darren followed us up and helped us stay saved. I remember youth camps in the bush, locked up at Parramatta, which he said in brackets I think was illegal. The incredible laughs we had at Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames. That was a serious outrage that we haven't had again. Crazy Halloween dramas and with chainsaws and sausages. Joining bands and being in ministry and seeing the church grow. In amongst all of this, Josh proposed to me. Here's a picture of them. I'm not sure if that was the time, but that was the picture they sent. We got married. Here's a picture of one of the wedding photos. That's the Bryan's Road building there in the background. We started a family, and we are now having the time of our lives in the great adventure of pioneering a church in Mauritius. Thank you, Parramatta Saints, and love from Mass. Here's a picture of the church recently. That was in June when we were there. They currently have an impact team from Pastor Tony and the Fairfield Church over there, and they were able to get into St. Andrews. Pastor Josh is a chaplain at St. Andrews, and was able to get a number of kids from there out to our youth night when we were there in June, and he was able to get Pastor Tony into St. Andrews, and they did a full outreach with all the year 10, 11s and 12s there with Pastor Tony, and Josh said that when they went there, because he has favor there, all the teachers left and just left him and Tony and the crew. And so rather than having to tone it down about, I met a man who changed my life, and if you want to know about that, you've got to come out to this service. They're able to preach Jesus, able to do an altar call. People responded, and they're believing God for people to be out to that service. Tony's back, I think, on Monday night. He's mostly there for Luke Smith in Quattrobon, but they're going to be back in Rose Hill on Monday night and believing for a big crowd of people there. Any quick questions of that? Josh and Maz? Mauritius? Okay, next one is Tony and Lil Hwang. Tony says, I was saved into the Fairfield Church from the streets of Parramatta in 2004 when an impact team from Thomastown, Victoria was here with Pastor Jeff Stowers singing on the streets. Sowing in one man's city and reaping in your own is a Bible truth, and God brings the increase. Here's a picture of the beginning of the Fairfield Church. That's not it. That's it. The church began, that's Alex and Robin Smelavides there on the right-hand side. Alex is about 6'6". This is the Newtown School of Arts, I think it was called. And told the story back when we talked about church planting that they began there. They got so many unsavory characters come to their church that his pastor advised him to move to another city, another suburb. So he moved from Newtown, telling nobody, just wasn't there next Sunday, and moved to Ashfield. And then some of those crazies actually found him in Ashfield. Pastor, where did you go? We were looking for you and we couldn't find you anywhere. And they moved from Newtown to Ashfield to Burwood. And then eventually with Peter Edwards, we moved from there into the Fairfield area. But that's the beginning of the church, the Fairfield Church in Newtown. Here's a picture of Tony and Lil getting married. Risky business. Here's Tony and Lil and Faith, their first daughter. In the early days, I think Faith, is Faith 18 now? Somewhere around there. Definitely driving, working and carrying on. And for some reason, he sent me a Granville Town Hall flyer. And these are my early graphic design days. I don't even know how I did that, but you look at some of the names there. It's 1995, and some of the names that were preaching at that conference. You can look around those, and like I said, early graphic design days, before I became an intricate proofreader. And my first impression of the church was, this is Tony in Fairfield. This doesn't look like what I thought in my mind a church was, an office space with 20 people. But what struck me was the genuine love of a small family of people that loved God and loved people. I was quickly introduced to the prayer room when I remember thinking these people talk to God like they really know Him and they have a relationship with Him. So I didn't care how small it was or where it was. All I knew was God saved me, and He saved me here. Here's a picture of Tony at the Perth conference, perhaps the first time that he went. He's the skinny Asian guy, second from the right. Here's another picture of him at the Perth conference. Here's a picture of him and his pastor at the time. and his next pastor as well. Here's a picture of some Fairfield disciples back in the day. And his pastor didn't rock on a singlet. And here's a picture of the Fairfield church with the Roman Gutierrez revival. And this was the revival that they had where the church doubled in size, literally doubled in size from 30 to 60 and continued to grow. And that was perhaps the first time that Pastor Gutierrez came to Sydney, and Peter Edwards had managed to get him into at least 3 high schools over there in the Fairfield area, and had tremendous impact. A few highlights from Tony over the years. One was losing my first pastor. Made me understand the reality of God's calling. I regretted not being a better disciple, so when I felt called, I decided to make the most of my time with our pastor. I took my call seriously and prepared myself for fulfilling the call. There was a working bee, and they were going to throw away a plaque with the church vision statement on it. The only thing that survived the church fire. I held on to it, believing that God, that one day I will hang this on the back of my own church. It is proudly displayed in the Fairfield church today. The second remembrance was God's breath of revival with Roman Gutierrez. That's the picture there. The church literally doubled from 30 to 60 after one revival and continued to grow over the years, 60, 90, 100, 120, etc. God had fulfilled a prophecy given to Pastor Edwards in 2005 conference. I remember he placed a vision of this number on the board, and God grew the church to 140 people, and I was sent out in 2013 to Liverpool. Taking back the land was the third point. Liverpool has always been on my heart, and not seeing our fellowship have breakthrough there, I said in my heart, that's not right. My pastor at the time tried to talk me out of going to Pioneer there, but he eventually agreed, and I went. I thank God I was able to play my part in laying down the foundations of that church planting centre. And then responding to the need in Fairfield, I moved the building to Hassel Street, where we've again doubled in size and influence. We planted a church every year since the takeover, and our first missionary into Mauritius. We're looking forward to all that God is going to do. Here's a picture of Fairfield from 2024 in the Hassel Road building, and here's a not too recent photo of Pastor Tony and his family. 4 biological children and 2 he has adopted from his sister, for a total of 6 children in the Hoang family. Any quick questions there? All right, that's the ones that I've received. I've got 2 or 3 that I haven't received anything from. I'm hurrying them up, and hopefully I'll get something from them. And then next week we'll do those last 3, and then some of the Parramatta saints that we're acknowledging for enduring for 40 years. We're going to be doing that next Sunday, perhaps the Sunday after that, and then start a brand new series, and we can put the memorial stones to bed. Pastor Dave.
Just a question. I don't know if we've already covered this. You may have, but how we ended up getting a conference without obviously the general meeting the targets of what a conference generally is. How we got one so early.
Yeah, I did cover that.
Sorry.
At some point back there, but it was kind of a passing comment. I said when we did the Granville Town Hall, and I did conferences over the years, I started with the Granville Town Hall, I said I have no idea how we got a conference. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. And so, and back, obviously as the fellowship grew from 1970, I got saved in 83. I'm here in 1990, in the early years, and there's a number of churches here, and we wanted to plant some churches. And I obviously spoke to Pastor Maston at the time and says, can we have a conference? He said, yeah, go ahead. So there was no, I don't know, there wasn't any, he preached here a couple of times over that kind of period of time, and I just asked him the question. He said yes, and we did. And so we did that for numbers of years. And then when he was replaced by David Vickery closed down the conferences that were in Sydney and in Melbourne. And we went back to 2 conferences in Beachborough. And then Pastor Mitchell was not happy with that. Pastor Wayman Mitchell wasn't happy with that. And I think at one leadership meeting in Perth was a bit of a heated kind of a scenario. But he asked me how many people from my church go to Perth conference. And I think I said probably 6 or 8 people, He goes, how many would go to the Sydney conference? I said, every one of them. I said, that would be true of all the Sydney churches. And so he told David Vickery that we were long overdue for having one in Sydney. Now, with conferences, you're right by saying qualifying for a conference, or there's a regional conference. So in certain places, and Sydney was one, and Melbourne was one, where they gave a regional conference where you had the rights to plant churches on Thursday and Friday night, but you're serving an area without actually qualifying by size or influence. And so that's how it started. And we have numbers of conferences around the world that are those kinds of conferences because it serves an area, but then you qualify. And so we've been qualified for a number of years by qualifying by size and influence and the number of churches and so forth. So that's been the case for a couple of years, but we've just continued on, I guess, being a regional conference, but again, qualify, if that's the question. Yeah. Is that the question? Yeah. Okay. There's a regional conference. There's a mini conference in Strathpine, but they can't plant churches. There's a mini conference in New Zealand. They can't plant churches. But us, Melbourne, and obviously Beachborough have conferences that can plant churches out of. Any other questions? Conferences, people, endurance, memorial stones. All right, we have a church in about 7 or 8 minutes.